If you can't throw putters, this is the exact video for you. I'm going to run through everything from nose angle to wobble to release angle, everything in this video. And I'm going to get you throwing good shots like this. If you're wondering what my credentials are, just watch this. Whoa. That would have been cool though. That would have been real cool if I made that. But I didn't. But it would have been cool. But I didn't. But it would have been cool. So, the first thing I want to talk about with throwing putters is going to be grip. I'm kind of weird with my grip, so I usually do a power grip, which is all fingers inside the rim, just like this. That's what I throw for all of my shots, except my putters. For my putters, I bring my ring finger and my middle finger onto the flight plate. This is the grip. I know Drew Gibson throws like this for everything. This is called a modified power grip. And what this helps me do is I'm trying to put the tiniest bit of nose up on my putters when I throw them. So when I throw a power grip, everything else, I'm trying to throw it nose down. So the disc is like this. When I'm trying to throw putters, I'm trying to get them a tiny bit nose up. So I change my grip very slightly, but if you're able to keep the disc a tiny bit nose up, or if that's just your natural release angle, then you can keep a power grip and that's fine. I can throw power grip putters, and that's something I'm going to try to learn to do. But if it helps you, try switching a grip. It might help you just get that release a tiny bit nose up. So the reason that's important is the biggest problem people have with throwing putters is they find that they just turn and burn, or they wobble and burn. Same thing. So they're both caused by similar things. So you could throw a wobbly shot and you wouldn't really care if it still went to the right place. But if you're throwing a wobbly shot and it's going to a bad place, that's a problem. Putters are much more sensitive to wobble than drivers are. Don't exactly know the scientific explanation. I assume it has to do with the moment of inertia. So putters obviously have a different moment of inertia to drivers, which means the putters don't handle wobble as well. It's also got to do with aerodynamics. But when the disc wobbles, when it has off-axis torque, what that means is you're getting more turbulence over the top of the disc, which is bad. Generally speaking, more wobble means the disc will turn more, which is actually not what we want with putters. Nose down does the same thing. So wobble has the same effect as going nose down. And if you throw a putter too nose down, more airflow comes over the top of the disc, which leads to too much turn. But that's not what we want. So when we throw it a tiny bit nose up, like that, we expose the bottom of the disc more, which makes it fly more stable. So that's the reason why if I rip a Takapus, even though it's very, very slow and not that overstable, it still doesn't turn. It kind of just goes straight. And it's because it's got the tiniest bit of nose up to stop it from turning. So that's one way you can effectively make it more stable without changing anything. So that's the nose angle piece. Wobble. Wobble is surprisingly easy to fix in theory. So I want you to imagine that my arm is essentially just stiff the whole way. So this arm here, if you can imagine I threw with a dead straight arm, that disc is going to have to release on this angle because this is called my swing plane. So imagine a plane here that matches the angle of the disc at release, which means if I'm throwing a hyzer, it's got to be a little bit lower, or an extreme hyzer, it's got to be even lower. The same thing applies when you're throwing regularly. So we bend this arm and extend all along this same plane. So that never changes. Wobble occurs when the disc leaves that plane, and then right at the last second it has to snap back to it, which means that motion combined with the acceleration and the rotation it gets at your release is what leads to it wobbling. Because it's moving up and then getting spun, this torque is getting turned into that, and it's very inefficient. So how do we fix it? The simple answer is keep everything on the same swing plane. For some people that might just mean keeping their elbow a little bit higher. That's a cue that you can use though, is literally just imagine that there's a giant, I don't know, wooden board in front of you, and everything has to stay on that board when you release. So when you throw a hyzer, it has to come down, and when you throw an anhyzer, it has to come up like this. And let's do a quick promo. Go get a Takapus. These are nice and stable, so they're good to learn how to throw putters, and I only bag Takapus for my putters, my putting putters and my throwing putters. That's how good I think this disc is. This is my favorite disc at the moment because it's so good. And to prove that, I'm gonna try ace this again. Ooh, it was good though. It was a good bid. So, the next thing I want to talk about is height and release angle. Putters are a little bit different compared to drivers and mid-ranges. With a driver, I can start it really low. I can have it go 6 feet across, above the ground, and I can still get it to go 450 or further. Putters aren't going to do that. So putters need a little bit more height, a little bit more ceiling than mids and drivers to reach their full potential. But it's important to note that if you give them too much height, they just kind of stall. So we want to have the right amount of height. And for me, if I were trying to park this basket, I would probably be aiming, like 20 feet in the air, which would look something like this. That was much lower, but you take the point. I can throw that very, very low and get it there. But then for me to throw an extra 30 feet, instead of trying to throw it 30 feet further, all I'm gonna do is double the height. And because putters have so much glide, if you just give them that wee little extra bit of height, they'll just push forward and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. Okay, I want to talk about one of the most misunderstood concepts in disc golf, and that is spin. So, I believe that having high spin is necessary to being a good putter thrower, because what spin does is it creates resistance to a change in angle. Some people think that spin gives you more distance or makes a disc turn more. It doesn't. That's what speed does. Spin is solely responsible for controlling the angle of the disc. So what that means is a higher spin player like me, I throw, generally speaking, at like 1370 RPM. What that means is when I throw, I'm going to throw the putter and it's just going to go dead straight the whole way. And that's useful when I combine that with my arm speed, because I can throw a shot that goes 330 feet down a tunnel, but it never leaves the line the entire way. But a player only throws 330 feet is going to have to throw a big S line to get that same distance. So, when you're not throwing putters as hard, you're going to see a little bit more fade, and that's where you get, putter hyzers and whatnot. But I generally tend to switch to an overstable approach disc for those lines, because the putter's specialty is the straight shot. And what I like to do with my putters is, if I'm still trying to throw a straight shot, Again, if I'm down a hallway, instead of taking something more overstable and throwing a flex, or trying to switch to a forehand, which again has more variance left and right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a putter and I'm going to focus on curling my wrist when it comes in here, and then really focus on this extension here. But I'm not going to run up as quick, and I'm not going to reach back and rotate as quick. So what that allows me to do is throw a shot like this. So you might not really be able to tell on camera, but that was like 30 feet shorter than the rest of them. But it still had that dead straight flight. And that's because when I do that, I still ensure that it has all the spin it could possibly get, just with less speed. And then again, I control the distance by using the height. And two last things I'm going to touch on. The first thing is, it's important to understand the end of a flight. So in the first 50% of the flight, a putter and a driver fly almost exactly the same, because they start with the same release velocity, and the putter slows down quicker, but the driver still is slowing down. So what we need to know is that in the second half of the flight, the putter, because it's so, it has so much friction against the air, it's not very aerodynamic, it's going to slow down much faster than the driver. What that means is if I throw a shot around a corner with a putter and then a driver, the putter is going to stop shorter, but it probably can get almost as far right as the driver. So it's completely limited in distance, and you can't necessarily throw a distance line with a driver, because putters don't need all that airtime to stop this, the massive angle variance, because they just go straight. So I can get max distance out of a putter throwing it on a touch of hyzer and having it just go straight and fading the whole way. So just take that into consideration. You don't have to throw these massive distance lines with putters to get distance on them. And the last thing I want to talk about is throwing them forehand. If you're like me and you throw a deep dish putter and you want to forehand it, I wouldn't recommend it, but I'll give you my quick tips for it. Instead of gripping the disc like this with your fingers, on the flight plate, or with your fingers turned towards the rim, you should bring your middle finger almost, so this way. You want to slide it down so that it's halfway on the rim, and then you want the other finger just to be pushing it into the rim. Like a stack grip. That's how I grip it when I'm trying to throw a forehand shot. And you want to be nice and soft when you're throwing these forehand. And the other key is to try be, again, as spinny as possible at the low speed. So my forehand putter would look something like this. So that was all right. But you need to know about forehands. What you need to know about forehands is they do tend to have more wobble and they have less spin. So you can't get away with wobble as much. So they're gonna probably wobble a bit in turn, but that's why we don't really throw them forehand. If you have any more questions, leave it in the comments. Don't forget to smash that like button, and let me know what videos you want to see next. Tutorials, challenges, I don't know. I can do whatever. Cheers.